You're listening to the Bible Uncut and Unfiltered. We believe the Bible doesn't need to be watered down or cleaned up to be understood. Our goal is to provide a healing place to discuss the questions you can't ask and the context you won't learn in church. I'm your host, Colin Connor. Now, on to the episode. Welcome, everyone, to a brand new episode of the Bible Uncut and Unfiltered, where we have a brand new guest. I am excited to introduce you to this friend that I met at Theology Beer Camp a couple years ago. He is the host of the Rethinking Faith podcast. He has also been on the Emogelicals, which, by the way, is the best name ever for a podcast. That is the Patreon side of Church and Other Drugs pod, and that will explain a little bit of why he is here today with us. He is a theologian who operates a lot in process, relational, open theology field. So if you have listened to our Tom Ord episodes, you'll know kind of where he stands on a lot of similar things there. And we are excited to have him here with us today talking metal music and theology, which some of you are going to go, that sounds amazing. And some of you are going, wait, those two are connected? Oh, yes, they are. Josh Patterson, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me. This should be a good time.
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of funny how Josh and I met, actually, because a couple years ago was my first beer camp. It was in Denver, Colorado, and one of the lunches, they had us all separated in whatever part of the country you came from. So, Northeast, Midwest, whatever. And I noticed this guy with black paint on his nails, and I overheard him saying that he was from Baltimore area. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm in Jersey. I was in Baltimore about a year ago for this whiskey blending event and stopped at a brewery there. And he said, oh, no kidding. What was the name? I gave the name of it. He said, I was working there. So there's a solid chance that Josh may have been working at the brewery the day that I went, and we wouldn't know each other for another year. So it's just funny how those things work out.
Yeah, that was cool. So that the blending bit was that would have been at Baltimore Spirits Co., right?
Yep, correct.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then Union was the brewery because they kind of share that complex together. Yeah, that's sweet.
It was the coolest. If you're into drinking any kind of alcohol, it was the coolest little area in the middle of just, I guess, the edge of Baltimore. But it had a wine tasting room, the distillery, and then the brewery all in a row. It's like there's something for everyone. And there was an ice cream shop too.
Yeah, ice cream shop, a coffee roaster, and there's even a rock climbing gym.
I didn't even realize that. So it really is everything. Do the rock climbing before the drinking.
Yes, preferably. We don't want anybody getting hurt.
Right. So, Josh, for our listeners who aren't familiar with you or Rethinking Faith, first off, what are you all doing? Go listen, subscribe. But can you give a quick just overview of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, my name's Josh Patterson. I started Rethinking Faith back in 2018, although at the time it was called Theology Doesn't Suck.
Yes, I've listened to some of those early episodes. There's a big difference.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. You can kind of see my own evolution or, spiritual growth, whatever language you're most comfortable with. But yeah, so I mean, vocationally, I am the director of creative content for the World Institute for Science, Religion, and Culture, which is an institute founded by Ilia Delio, one of my favorite living theologians. So it's been a real honor to get to work with her. I'm a former pastor. I served in vocational ministry for about 6 years. And then, I stopped doing that, became a professional brewer, and now I find myself working with Ilia, which is super cool. I also work for Trip Fuller and Homebrewed Christianity. You mentioned Theology Beer Camp. I am the camp director for Theology Beer Camp. So we have a really fun team that's, been working hard putting this event together since about January. So that's a fun thing that I do. And then, I'm a nerd. I love theology. I love philosophy, read a lot of books, do podcasts, have fun conversations with people like yourself.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I think I see an Avenged Sevenfold shirt there.
Oh, so the inspiration is very close. This is actually one of our Emogelicals shirts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, but
nice.
Yes, you picked up on some of our inspiration.
Oh yeah, and it helps them going to see them in concert on Friday.
All right, there you go.
And I've got some representation here too. I've got my Breaking Benjamin chain, my Hailstorm shirt, got a funeral portrait on this side, and Motionless in White over here. So we got rock, emo, metal, a little bit of everything.
you come very prepared.
I do.
Well
I
done.
thought about having my day seeker whiskey next to me while we talked. So, yeah, as we're talking music here, when would you say you first saw music as more than just background noise? Like, where did it actually become an expression of your identity? And why did metal really stand out to you?
That's a fun question. I think really probably sometime around middle school. You know, I've always had somewhat of an angsty side.
Yeah.
And when I found music that kind of expressed that, and also, you know, I've always kind of been somewhat of a contrarian, admittedly. And so, you know, I had this weird experience where I noticed like the music that my peers were listening to, right? So middle school, we're talking like Chris Brown and Rihanna and Soulja Boy and Drake.
Yep.
That whole thing, that's what was popular. And I would feign as if that was the kind of music that I liked, while secretly, you know, on my iPod, I was spinning August Burns Red and
Yep.
As I Lay Dying and these kind of things. So I think, yeah, probably around that time, just, you know, when kids are angsty and start trying to figure out what puberty is and what it means to be a person, you know, and living with constant imposter syndrome and trying to navigate middle school. I think that's kind of really when it started to catch on. And yeah, I think just the metal genre specifically, I mean, I'm sure there's something to be said about I have ADHD, and metal music for some reason tends to do something nice to ADHD brains. I like the speed, that it was different, that people would, you know, be like, oh, what are you listening to? You know, these kind of things. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a good answer, but it's something like that.
No, it's cool. Did you grow up in a kind of evangelicalism where that was allowed? Because for me, it definitely was not.
Yeah, so my church experience growing up is a little bit interesting. I kind of grew up nominally Christian at first in a Methodist congregation. And then my parents found the wonders of early 2000s contemporary Christian music and found out that the Southern Baptist Church down the street played that kind of music. And so we started going there. And then, you know, my parents got connected to this Christian retreat called the Walk to Emmaus. And that's kind of when we really started going to church more regularly. So it wasn't that like the genre per se was off limits, but definitely no swearing. So when I first had an iPod, I remember my mom would watch me like pay my 99 cents for my songs to make sure that none of them were explicit. And I would be like, yeah, but mom, you can't understand the words anyway. Like, why? So it wasn't like overly strict, but it definitely was more strict than, you know, my friends.
I think that's probably the experience most people had. For me, growing up really fundamentalist Baptist, the music I had to hide on the iPod, well, MP3 player for me, because I've never been an Apple guy, but it was the CCM. Casting Crowns was what I had to hide. You know, a little bit Journey was what I had to hide. But my introduction to metal came from playing hockey as a kid.
Oh, sweet. Nice.
Yeah. I played, oh gosh, probably about a decade of roller hockey as a goalie. And every week it was the exact same playlist. The kids started it at the exact same song every time. But it introduced me to a lot of songs that once I got out of Bible college and started finding myself again, I was able to find those songs again and really reconnect. And it gave me, it felt so much more relatable than pop music. I mean, I've got plenty of Taylor on my playlist, everything too. So I'm not dissing that, but it felt a lot more like it spoke to how I felt. And like I couldn't express those things in the fundamentalism I grew up in. So it gave me a voice for how I was feeling.
Yeah, the hockey thing's funny. You know, when you said that, it reminded me. So I'm a huge hockey fan. I play ice hockey.
Caps, right?
Yes, I'm a Caps. I'm assuming Devils fan.
No, Flyers. We're
Okay,
on the Philly side of Jersey.
All right, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. Fair enough. We can still be friends. I'll let it slide. But I remember playing, there's a game for PlayStation 2 called NHL Hits 2002. And the opening track for that game is Rollin' by Limp Bizkit.
Yes.
And that was, you know, Josh Patterson's introduction to new metal.
Right.
At however old I would have been in 2002. What is that? It's born in 94, so 8.
Yeah.
And it's Limp Bizkit. It's a good thing I didn't know how, you know, we didn't have Google and Spotify at the time to listen to their other music.
Well, honestly, Fred's a little better than what I had on the Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2.
Oh, Yes, I remember that.
Hot action cop going on, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's a
Or
whole other
underground. Yep, yep.
episode. So it sounds like this may not have been as much your experience, but I know it has been for many of our listeners because we have plenty who have been in fundamentalism or more conservative evangelicalism, where music is not about preference. It doesn't really matter what you like. It's a spiritual thing. And you even brought this up with no explicit language in it. Or, for me, it wasn't supposed to have a certain drum beat. It was supposed to be, 2/4, not 1/3, or something like that, or vice versa. I'm terrible with music terms. So stuff like that, where it was all a matter of spirituality, and anything like metal or even rock was considered spiritually dangerous. What do you think people are actually afraid of? Because I think it's got to be deeper than just they don't like that music. Well, what were we really afraid of when we took that kind of view?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times, maybe this seems too reductionistic or rudimentary, but I think we just tend to fear the unknown. And this kind of like, heavier music definitely has a specific look and vibe to it.
Oh, yeah.
It's dark, it's skeletons, it's blood, it's pentagrams. And so, like, that is understandably going to be, something that's like, well, wait a minute, guys, is this like satanic or something? Are we doing Satan worship?
Right.
And so but I think also that's part of the aesthetic. I think it's intentionally that way from within the kind of, metal community, as it were. I think fear of the unknown is definitely a big one. And I mean, if you grew up in a tradition where it was heavy on things like spiritual warfare and the demonic, then this kind of music could very much be seen as a portal or like an access point for evil spirits or something like that. That wasn't necessarily my experience growing up. Although there are still, even as a metalhead, there are still songs that sometimes I'll hear and I will have some of what Daryl Van Tongeren calls religious residue, which is like, even if cognitively we no longer believe a certain thing, it's still ingrained in us. And so like, there's a song even on the playlist that I sent you today that when I listen to it, it still kind of builds up that fear in me. Like, wait a minute, is this doing something cheeky that it shouldn't be? So I all about to say, I think I kind of have compassion for that sense of fear, but also, over time, as I leaned into it and listened to lyrics and contemplated them a bit more, some of that fear kind of lifted.
Yeah, and too with that, like it definitely covers dark topics, and like like you have the skeleton on your shirt for the evangelicals and everything, but at the end of the day, that kind of thinking is also central to Christianity. People have gone so far as to say it's like a death cult, which is probably more provocative than helpful. But our whole central thing is just around the death of this human being, and a very gruesome death at that. And we claim that person was God, like God died this way. That's pretty metal.
It's very metal. Yeah. I mean, deicide's nuts, right? Like the greatest crime possible committable is deicide, killing God.
Yeah.
And Christians are like, yeah, we'll build a religion around that.
Yeah, exactly.
Metal.
And yet so often churches assume that worship is just uniquely spiritual music, whether that's old hymns or casting crowns or whatever it may be. But everything else then just becomes entertainment, where you build this sacred secular divide where we have sacred music and then we have everything else, and everything else is acceptable in varying degrees. But I have heard a lot of people say that they have had really, I hesitate to say spiritual, but spiritual experiences at concerts, and they feel something greater than them. I would be curious if you have ever had any experience like that you have felt was like sacred or spiritually formative at a show instead of in a church.
Yeah, absolutely. I have. And I think that's part of the draw to music and live music in particular in general. I mean, I've had multiple experiences. Most recently, I got to see Emery live, which is one of my favorite screamo emo bands, like OG.
Yeah.
The first song that they played, people were all singing it, and it definitely brought tears to my eyes. It was a moving experience. And so I think part of why that is people have been singing together longer than we've been able to speak, like humming and chanting. It's like, it's very primal. And Durkheim refers to this as kind of a collective effervescence. And so when you are with a large group of people, all kind of with the same goal, doing the same thing together, then you do very much become a part of something larger than yourself, right? It's like people reporting spiritual experiences at the Taylor Swift Eras tour or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's just part of like what it means to be human. And so, yeah, I most definitely have. I've had plenty of spiritual experiences in mosh pits, as it were, rather than in a church.
And that's been so interesting for me to watch in the last several years because I was never allowed to go to any concerts growing up. My first ever concert was actually during the pandemic. It was an outside drive-in for Casting Crowns in North Carolina.
Right on.
Yeah. And then the first concert I ever took my wife to after we got married, this was when we were still in our Baptist church, and it was the Hella Mega Tour of Green Day, Fall Out Boy, and Weezer.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yes. Still one of the best shows we've been to. But I've noticed how rigid I felt in concerts. And I'm a white guy, obviously, so I don't have a bunch of rhythm anyway. But I just realized how hard it was for me to move my body at all or feel embodied, because our fundamentalist tradition was very anti-Pentecostal. So it didn't like you being embodied or feeling anything. You were looked at funny if you raised your hand in worship, right? So I actually feel like for me, metal has, and not just metal, but just going to concerts has given me an opportunity to feel my own embodiment. And I can see this communal experience of everyone else feeling something similar. And there's just nothing like hearing several thousand people all singing the exact same song, and you can feel the emotion in it. It's given me permission to feel things I wasn't allowed to in church.
Yeah, I really think you're hitting on something important, the embodiment piece. Because so for me, I'm a very like heady person. I live up here too much.
Same.
And embodiment has always been kind of difficult for me. And actually going back to something you asked off the get-go about why metal music, I've thought about this a lot, and I think like kind of metal or emo music gives me, it helps make me feel embodied because I live in my mind so much, and also because I have a tendency to repress negative emotions that I perceive as negative. That's kind of therapist want me to say. This music allows me to express and feel those kind of things in a way that feels safe because I'm also deeply empathetic. So it's almost like I can feel the pain of others while repressing my own. So this kind of, it grounds me and embodies me to express some of these emotions I otherwise have a difficult time expressing.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, you word that so well. I think that is pretty accurate from my experience as well. So that's been really powerful to feel. And I think holy too.
Yeah, I would say so.
As we've talked a little bit about the dark topics of metal music, I think a lot of critics, and this goes back to Ozzy Osbourne days and Black Sabbath and all that, like people confuse exploring darkness with celebrating darkness. And metal spends so much time talking about grief or rage or depression, injustice, death, you name it. Why do you think we have become so uncomfortable with art that refuses to look away from suffering?
So I think if we're going to lean into that kind of sacred secular divide, speaking to the secular side of things, we just have, as a society, we have a genuine fear of death. We like to pretend that it's not real. We take our old and sick people and lock them away in homes. We sell our constantly sold products to make us younger, more beautiful, etc. And so we really have this death anxiety, which I think is, again, part of what it means to be human, that we tend to push away. And so when it's thrown in your face, that can be very jarring.
True.
But then from maybe a Christian perspective or more sacred perspective, I think one of the reasons that we get uncomfortable with this kind of music is because it almost becomes an indictment of God. And what I mean by that is,
yes,
if we believe that God is all loving and all powerful, and then we hear music that is a genuine expression of people's suffering, that causes some kind of cognitive dissonance. That's difficult for us. Seems like, wait a minute, it can't be that way. And so I think that's part of why I'm a process thinker, because my concept of God got shattered by my lived experience. But I think that's definitely a part of it. And I also think when we see things like suffering and injustice and depression, there is a moral or ethical demand that is put upon us to go out and do something about it. And so it's easier, again, just to push it off and pretend that it's not there. So the honesty demands something of us. And I think that's difficult for most of us to handle.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, there's nothing wrong if you like pop music or country music better or something like that, but you're not necessarily going to be challenged to change something about your life listening to Katy Perry. You pull up some good metal music, and I think we'll talk a little bit later about the playlist that you sent, but those songs challenge something in us. And even if it's just our sense of comfort or our sense of self, or like you said, it kind of indicts God, of saying, WTF, like what are we doing here?
Yes.
And I think a lot of people are so scared to even just be honest in a prayer, that to be so blunt with God feels disrespectful or blasphemous. But it isn't actually that. I think it's really faithful with the lament tradition in scripture, right? Like, have you ever read Job? And for any of our listeners, this episode is kind of a soft launch of something we've been working on for a couple years now, where I want to address theology and music, both criticizing some of the theology of church music and also finding the theology in secular music. So if you like this, great. We're going to have more of it in the future. If not, well, we're still keeping our other episodes too, so you can listen to those. But there's this one song that I thought of. It's Bad Omens, which I had the pleasure of seeing for the first time earlier this year with President opening. I was so thrilled to see a President song on that playlist you sent. And they ended the show. Their encore song was Dethrone.
Nice.
Right. And for those who aren't familiar, the song is directed at God, and it's saying, when I get to heaven, I am going to just totally spit in the face of everything there and take God off of his throne. And like, that sounds crazy blasphemous. And I can already imagine some listeners are uncomfortable with that. But again, I'm thinking, that's kind of Job's song. I could totally hear him saying that, because he literally says in scripture, I would have done this better. Like, let me talk to God, bring him here, and I'll show him how it should have been. And that is in our Bible. So I don't think that's something that we should be scared of. I mean, I'm sure there's a disrespectful way you can talk to God, but sometimes it's actually really holy to bring that kind of lament forward.
Yeah, most definitely. No, I agree with you. The anger and the lament tradition, that's actually something that I think is one of the gifts that metal music offers those who have, eyes to see and ears to hear, if you're willing to. Because there is, I mean, you mentioned that song, there is this kind of radical honesty that also, I think we find in the pages of scriptures too. Like, right, we have the Psalms of lament. We have biblical authors saying, God, you're a liar. You don't keep your promises. WTF, bro. Like, this is a part of our tradition. And I think we should lean into that. And, there's, once we get there, we'll talk about it more. But there's a song on the playlist that I sent you called Unanswered. And it's a song by a band called Suicide Silence. And Mitch Lucker, when he was still alive, wrote that song. And that's one of the songs that I listen to, and it still makes me deeply uncomfortable. But I really like it. But there's an honest lament in that song where he's crying out. First, he says, I don't believe in God. But then he's saying, where is your God? And then he's crying out to God regardless. And so Lucker in that song is performing what I would call something more of a radical theology, a screaming into the void, which in some kind of weird way presupposes that there's something on the other side there listening.
Right.
And so I think, that, I have found that God is big enough to handle all of my shit, for lack of a better phrase. The good, the bad, the ugly, the confusion. I wrote a piece recently on my Substack about swearing, basically. But I talked about how...
Oh, yeah, I like that article. Yeah, that was a good one.
How sometimes, like, an honest prayer is just like, God, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And, like, that's the most I can muster. And I think metal music has offered that to me. But again, I don't think it is without place in the larger Christian tradition. I think it's right there in the pages of our Bibles.
And that helps us reclaim what you were so tempted to call negative emotions too, right?
Yeah. Right.
Because like this was probably similar for you, but I always heard, well, there is righteous anger, but then you were never allowed to express it. That
Mhm.
was basically just against abortion and queer people
Right.
in those circles. That was the only form of righteous anger. So I feel like this gives us an opportunity to reclaim a legitimate emotion as something that is not sinful. Now, you can express it sinfully, but it's something that actually needs to come out. And I think metal draws that out of us in a really healthy way.
Yeah, I've been trying to get comfortable in therapy, recognizing and learning that embracing our emotion is part of what makes us human. And that's the wide range of emotions that we experience. And none of the
Mhm.
emotions are inherently good or bad, they're kind of neutral. But to your point, it is then what we do with that that can be problematic. But I have found, especially with dudes, like to be stereotypical, it seems like most of the time as men, the only acceptable emotion we're allowed to offer up is anger. Like everything
Mhm.
comes out as anger, whereas like crying or sadness or those kind of things are kind of pushed aside. But I have found by experience when I do stuff those things, then they do just end up coming out as anger
Yeah.
in a way that does become sinful and not helpful. Yeah, and so I think they're important to acknowledge and feel and experience. Yeah, as long as we're careful with how we direct things, right? Like even in that article about cursing, I make it clear, like I'm not saying you should use your language to tear down other people. Like if we're
Right.
using words as weapons, that's not helpful. But if we're using it to express genuine felt emotion that, what the heck doesn't quite do for you, then maybe it's okay to lean into that a bit. But
Oh, absolutely. And that made me think too how this fascinates me so much. There is this stereotype of the metal music fan, usually this big guy with a beard who's like angry or aggressive or something. But in all the concerts I've been to, those are the nicest people. Just think of how much care I've seen, how many metal concerts I've been to where the singer on the stage says, "Be good to each other on your way out," or something like that. And there's this vulnerability that I think is drawn out in that actually many churches lack.
hmm.
And it makes me feel like metal is giving us something emotionally that the church is struggling to provide. And I'm curious if you could speak into that and maybe give some direction of what you think that may be.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. And, August Burns Red has a phrase that they always return to where they say they make angry music for happy people.
Happy people. They have the best merch ever. Like,
Oh, yeah.
just pause the podcast and go look up August Burns Red merch. It's amazing.
Yeah, and also Matt Griner, however you say his last
Mm,
name, I think is arguably one of the best, if not the best drummers in metal music today. The dude is disgusting.
fantastic. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
seen them twice.
Yeah, he's just insane. But yeah, I mean, I think there is something to that because the music is so loud and violent and angry. You would, I guess correlate that to loud, violent, angry people. But my experience has
Mm,
also been just the opposite. When I go to these metal shows or punk shows or emo shows, it's such a beautifully inclusive and accepting crowd and group of people. And as weird as it is, because you have people moshing and pushing each other and hitting each other, there's still rules to a mosh pit. Like there
yeah.
is proper etiquette where if someone gets knocked down, you stop and you help them up. You're still looking out for each other. So it's almost like this controlled chaos. And I think what's interesting about that is it's a place that refuses to ignore the messiness of life. And it acknowledges that all of us here have our own shit going on. And that's why we're at an emo show. Or that's why we're at a
Right.
metal concert. And we're here to express that together. And it's just, there's something really powerful and beautiful about people coming together, recognizing those things, and then just being in community with one another and looking out for each other that I think the church aspires to be, but often fails to meet, right? Because to an extent, there can be, depending on the tradition, like very exclusionary rules and like, you
Mhm.
can belong if kind of language where you just don't get that at a metal show, right? You have all sorts of people there and,
What do you think churches could do differently then? Because we're not going to have a mosh pit in the middle of the service,
Right.
but
Right.
how could we learn a little bit from metal concerts and bring that in to make the church more inclusive or more healthy in allowing expression of emotions?
Yeah, I mean, I think just being willing to sit with people in their struggles without feeling the need to fix them or solve the problem immediately.
It's
Um,
huge.
like so often within the Christian tradition, it's almost like we, you know, Jesus gets crucified, but we know Easter is coming. And so whenever there's like
Mhm.
suffering, we always try to be like, yeah, okay, I know that sucks, but also, it's going to be happy in the end. And so we tend to skip over that part. Whereas for me, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, those are my favorite, maybe unsurprisingly, favorite days during the whole Easter bit. Because if you put yourself in the disciples' shoes, they didn't know Jesus was going to, they thought that it was over. This person they
Yeah.
thought the Messiah, they watched him be brutally murdered, and then they just had to sit in that, right? And so I think that's something that the church could do better, is learn how to just sit with people, not offer neat, packaged, happy clappy solutions, but be willing to get messy, be willing to recognize that, like, yeah, life sucks a lot. And there is suffering and pain and heartache and injustice. And there's not always easy answers or solutions to that. And sometimes it's not even the right thing to do, is to offer, like, oh, here's the theological reason why, that God did this thing to you. I had a professor in college. I went to Messiah College, a private Christian school, and he drilled into us what he called the ministry of presence, not as gifts, but presence, being there.
Yeah.
He was like, sometimes the best gift you can offer somebody is to show up and shut up.
Amen to that.
And just be present. So I think creating spaces like that, and not being afraid of the messiness of life could go pretty far.
It would, because I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I've dealt with some pretty severe depression for many years, and I actually just ended up on Lexapro a year ago. That has been tremendously life-changing, but I never felt like I could talk about it in church.
Mhm.
And as much as we said, we want you to be vulnerable, we want you to be honest and real, I knew that there wasn't really going to be a solution. There was going to be pastoral counseling. There was going to be prayer. There was going to be guilt and asking what I had sinned to feel that way. And then I look at metal music and how many people talk about therapy. I think about how every Disturbed show, David Draymond talks about suicide and then brings someone up on stage and plays The Light, which is an amazing song. Again, if you don't know The Light by Disturbed, pause the podcast now, go listen to that. That's more important. Come back. But those sorts of things, or the organizations that have been made for, like, introducing therapy. I've been to metal shows where there were tents that offered just free, we're not here to fix you, just come talk about it if you need someone, right? And that kind of openness has been so validating for me. It's made me feel safer than I ever felt in church.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, the mental health thing is a big part of that community. You have really cool organizations like To Write Love on Her Arms, right? Which deals with suicide. And yeah, I mean, that's a topic that devastates me. I've written a couple pieces on it. I did a podcast conversation with Dr. Simon Critchley, who's, in my opinion, one of the greatest living continental philosophers. And he wrote a book a number of years ago called Notes on Suicide. And in it, he's pulling from, I want to say, Freud when he says this, but he basically argues that suicide is impossible because it's actually murder, and it's murder of the hated other, but that other just happens to be the self. And so this kind of complex philosophical language, he says that suicide is the reduction of the subject to an object. So it's a dehumanization and then the expelling of that hated object. And that was like the saddest thing I think I ever read. Like, after I read that paragraph, I sat there and wept for a while, and that has always really stuck with me. And like, I don't want to live in a world where that's a reality. And so, yeah, to your point, I really do appreciate the amount of people who I've met through this kind of music, that this kind of music has aided them in some of the literally darkest times in their life is just deeply moving. For me, I don't see how God is not present in that.
Absolutely.
Even through these mediums. Yeah. So,
and that brings me back to what you said a few minutes ago about the messiness and how this kind of draws us into seeing the messiness of life and yet finding controlled chaos in it. It made me think of the messiness of God becoming human. Now, I would love for your theology/philosophy brain to talk a little bit about messiness in incarnation then, because I think we've sanitized it so much where, sure, we'll say Jesus was 100% God, 100% man, but we don't think about the times that Mary or Joseph had to wipe his butt, or the wet dreams that he had as a teenager, or we don't like thinking about those things. We don't like thinking about if he ever had a cold or whatever, had some fish that went bad and was on the toilet all day. But that is stuff we have to wrestle with if we accept the incarnation. So how does that reflect a messiness that we would do better to recognize?
yeah, absolutely. And I'll say this because typically thinking about the incarnation is like one of the things that still deeply moves me within the Christian tradition. Like everybody kind of focuses on different things. For some people it's resurrection, it's incarnation, it's atonement, whatever it might be. For me, it's the incarnation, just because it is a wild claim that the creator and sustainer of the universe became incarnate in a person, in a human being, on a tiny ass planet in the corner of some random galaxy in a massive universe.
Yeah.
That is like an insane thing to believe, but it's so deeply moving because for me, the incarnation demonstrates God choosing not to be God without us, fully entering into what it means to be human, which means, Jesus experienced the things you're talking about. Like Jesus had to poop when he was alive, right? Jesus had, you said, nocturnal emissions. Like if we don't allow Jesus to embody and experience the full range of what it means to be human, then the point of the incarnation is mute, because that's the whole point, is God identifying with creation. And so for me, what moves me so deeply about that is not only did God become human, but then God carried that out to like the logical conclusion, which is death. And not just that, scripture says death on a cross, right?
Yeah.
That's the magic for me. And I think when we move away from that, then we just make Jesus this like abstract dude out there that's so perfect that we can't even relate to, when it should be the opposite. I think the incarnation should be, no, we can relate. I think Jesus comes to teach us what it means to be human. And then his message is like, yeah, and so can you. Now go and do otherwise. And one more thing too, when it comes to the messiness, I think the most moving thing to me, or one of my favorite Bible stories, is Doubting Thomas. I think Thomas gets a bad rap because, like, I feel like if you and I were in that situation, we'd probably do the same thing.
Absolutely.
And he went from this like rah disciple, like, God, Jesus. And then, crucifixion happens. The first time Jesus appears, Thomas isn't there. And then the disciples are like, hey, dude, you'll never believe what happened. You'd be like, yeah, you're right. That's nonsense. And it happens a second time, and Thomas is there. And he's still, even with Jesus in front of him, he's like, yeah, dude, I don't know. And Jesus invites him to, put his hand in the wound, right? We all know the story. I read that a little bit differently, though, because I see the incarnation and this picture of Jesus wounded post-resurrection, by the way. So the scars remain. I think that's something important. And those scars to me represent Jesus identifying fully with the human condition and with all those who die cross dead. So every black body hung from a tree, every queer body strung up on a fence, every woman and child bombed in these pointless wars, like God chooses solidarity with them, and that is represented in the human flesh of Jesus. And so what Jesus does is invite Thomas to do the same, to identify. When he has Thomas put his hand in his side, he is inviting Thomas to identify with the wounds of the world.
Beautiful.
to me, that is the message of Christianity. And that is what's lost when we sanitize Jesus and think of him just as this abstract thing, is that Thomas's point of faith comes from identifying with the wounded, with the suffering, with the messiness. That's where, for me, it's an existential kind of faith. That's the risk in a direction. So anyway, that
I absolutely love that.
Strongly about the incarnation.
Oh, I can tell. That will preach.
Yeah.
While we're talking about Jesus, we've mentioned earlier that there is a certain gathering of people to talk theology and drink some beer, and it is called Theology Beer Camp. Last week we had Trip on, so if you all listening have not heard that yet, go check that out. That was an awesome conversation nerding out about Lord of the Rings and theology. But
I'm sure Trip had a blast.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I told him, we usually do about an hour for our interview episodes. He says, "Can you go long today?"
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, we got this.
And also, I don't know if you know this, but there's a rule that Trip has that he's not allowed on his podcast, and also with Theology Nerd Throwdown, he's not allowed to bring up Tolkien or Lord of the Rings within the first hour. It can only come after.
Oh, and if you've listened to that episode, you know why.
Yeah,
Because he will go on. But it was awesome. And you have a big part in Theology Beer Camp. You've been our connection with being a part of it as one of the God Pods this year. And the theme is the God Podcalypse. And it made me think of how the prophets in scripture, apocalyptic literature like Revelation, or even just an apocalyptic tradition like Jesus is argued to be a part of, often uses very shocking imagery. Like, just go read Revelation, right? There's monsters everywhere. There's judgment. There's boils, locusts, and it just has all of these monster elements that kind of fit in with metal music a lot too, right? Like we've talked about August Burns Red, they have the song Leviathan. Mm-hmm. And it makes me just kind of wonder if you would say that metal carries on the prophetic tradition of scripture. But with that little teaser, before we answer that, give a little bit of an update on Beer Camp, what we have looking forward to. Trip gave a general overview, but what's some stuff that you are really excited about that you think the listeners should know?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I absolutely love Theology Beer Camp. It is very near and dear to my heart. So after I stopped being a pastor, I decided I was going to be done doing the podcast. I was going to shut it down. I had my final episode planned. Dan Koch was going to interview me to end things. And I reached out to Trip because, he had been continues to be one of my, biggest influences. And I told him yeah, dude, I'm done with the podcast. And he was like, oh, that's a bummer, dude. I was going to invite you to be a God Pod at Theology Beer Camp this year. And so I went. That was my first time in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Oh, Shout out to Will Rose, the pastor at the church there. Will the Thrill from Chapel Hill, as we like to call him. I was a brewer at the time, and Trip had me make a special beer called Process Party that I made and brought to camp, which was super cool. And then just slowly over time, I kept getting more and more involved in, my friendship with Trip, continued to grow. And now I find myself as the program director, which is nuts, or the camp director. And it's just, for me, Beer Camp has given me a place to belong, to fully be myself, to ask the kind of questions that Josh Patterson wants to ask and not have people think I'm crazy for asking them. I mean, in a very real way, if I can put it this way, Theology Beer Camp minus the screamy part, embodies a lot of what I like about the metal community. It's a community. It's a community of misfits and outcasts and people who've been hurt by the church. But then at the same time, there are pastors and theologians and professional religious people, scholars, all that come together to celebrate and have fun and have nerdy conversations and, drink good beer. If beer's not your thing, my buddy Jed from Church and Other Drugs is heading up the AA program this year. So we have Alcoholics Anonymous on site for people who don't drink, because, we want our sober friends to be a part of things as well. So yeah, it's just, for me, it's a deeply personal thing. It's my community. It's my people. I look forward to it every year. And that's what I'm most excited about. It's cool to have speakers. It's fun to be Ilya Delio and Cornell West and, Tom Ward and whoever is speaking. but really it's the community, it's the people, it's the hallway conversations and the lunch gatherings. That's what I get excited about. So yeah, that's
absolutely.
Bible and beer.
I agree. And for our listeners, if you have enjoyed any of our interview episodes, I would say probably a solid 75% of them have come about because of some relationship I've made at beer camp. So that just goes to show, like, there is so much to this. It's not just sitting around talking theology. It's not just sitting around drinking beer. It is so much more. And as cool as the sessions are, my favorite part is always just talking with new people at lunch and just feeling like you're not alone. You're not crazy. And you get people from all these different traditions having similar experiences, and it makes you feel not alone. And
100%.
that's priceless.
100%.
So we have our code for beer camp that we advertise. We'll make sure to drop that clip in here. And I know tickets are going fast, so if you have not gotten it yet, so grab your ticket and we will see you there October 8th through the 10th in Kansas City, Missouri. Now,
we're
Josh,
also
going back. Oh,
can I say one more thing about that?
Please.
So we're also on, I don't know when this is going to come out, but on August 15th, we are launching our, what we call our, we just changed the name, dang it. So in the past, we've called it our BYOB tickets. Basically, it's the online version, but we're calling it something, so to lean into the God Podcalypse vibe, we have TBC 26 FM, and we're broadcasting from the wasteland. And so our online tickets are broadcast from the wasteland into the comfort of your home. So those are going on sale. If you can't be with us in person, then like the online version's cool. Obviously you miss the community piece, but you get, all of the main stage sessions, you get the live stream of, and then also we have a brand new live podcast stage this year that all of those conversations will be live streamed as well. And then you get the recordings afterwards and these kind of things. So if you can't be there in person but are interested, then this might be a good way for you to test the waters and kind of see what we're about.
Absolutely. You get to listen to Rockin' Robin on FM over there.
Right, basically, you got it. Yes.
Yep. Oh, that's great. Hey friends, hope you're enjoying listening to the episode so far. Just wanted to interrupt real fast to let you know about Theology Beer Camp coming up in October. It will be October 8th through the 10th in Kansas City, Missouri this fall. It is 3 days of theology nerd heaven. You have these awesome theology sessions, then you have time to just talk with other people who are figuring out their faith, and some fantastic drinks. And even if you are in the sober community, there is even an AA meeting and non-alcoholic options as well. It is a fantastic time. We have had so much fun the last couple years, and we are going to be one of the official God Pods again this year. So that means I have a special discount code that I get to share with you all here. Now, this is just for you all, dear listeners, because you mean so very much to me. So, out of the goodness of my heart, and definitely not because all of the God Pods got this, I have a discount code to share with you for 10% off your ticket price. If you head to theologybeer.camp, that is theologybeer.camp, when you go to buy your tickets, use the code GODPODS10, that is GODPODS10, GODPODS10, and you will get 10% off your order. I hope to see as many of you there as possible. Would love to get to meet some of you that I haven't been able to before. Remember, it's October 8th through the 10th in Kansas City, Missouri, theologybeer.camp. GODPODS10 is your discount code for 10% off. All right, let's get back to the episode. So, God Podcalypse. How might metal be carrying on the prophetic tradition of Scripture?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to apocalyptic literature, I think it's important to kind of point out what it is and what it's not. Like, apocalypse doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world. Apocalypse just means it's a revealing, an uncovering. At times when you're writing within this apocalyptic kind of genre, you're trying to point at things that are really difficult to capture with words. And so you have to tell stories, and you have to talk about monsters and dragons and, that, like how we tell stories. And so I think metal music does the same thing. It can capture the human emotion, the experience in, language and in story that is bigger and more grand than some kind of like literal something, when those literal words just don't do it justice, right? I think of, actually, before we got on, I'm working on a piece that I've been nervous to put out into the world. I've been sitting on it for quite some time because I know
that feeling.
Yeah, it critiques influencer culture. and I am a part of that. And so it's an indictment of myself, but also, of, I think, a larger problem. But I'm using this song Playing God that is off Motionless in White's most recent album.
New album, right? Decades, yeah.
Yeah, featuring Corey Taylor from Slipknot. And that song is a critique of influencer culture. And I was like, this is perfect. But they're using this big, very aggressive, like grandiose language that I'm not comfortable using, but they capture the heart of what I'm trying to say. And I think that's an example. Sometimes, like when you look at, I don't know, like genocides actively going on in the world, using languages of monsters and demons is the only real way to capture that, because our finite language struggles to speak to the reality of what's happening. And so I think that's kind of where the music can carry on that prophetic tradition. Yeah, I don't know. There's a variety of songs we could talk about, which I guess maybe we'll do that here.
Yeah.
Soon.
Let's take that route now, because you have written about finding profound theology in metal lyrics. I really love that article you did a few months ago now about Lorna Shore.
Oh yeah,
that
was the In Darkness one about Advent with Aaron Simmons.
Yes.
Yeah. Which, by the way, if you didn't know this, shout out Aaron Simmons. He's friends listening. Aaron is a philosopher, a phenomenologist. Specifically, he's big on Soren Kierkegaard, if you all have heard of that, and also
Camping with Kierkegaard. And it's Camping with Kierkegaard, and was it a Philosophy in the Wild, I think is his Substack?
Yep. Well, he has a new book that just came out. It's an edited volume, and it's called The Heaviest Ideas in the Universe, a Philosophy of Heavy Metal.
And for our listeners, I already have that on my Kindle, and I'm working to hopefully get him on to talk about that. So
yeah, please do. If you need connection, I will happily connect you to Aaron.
Oh, amazing.
He's a wonderful human being.
I've really enjoyed learning from him, so I'm looking forward to reading that.
Yeah, I'm jealous because my copy has not arrived yet.
So I want to give you then some theological topics.
Okay.
Rapid fire here, and I want you to name the metal song that best exemplifies these theological topics, and maybe just a brief explanation of why to you.
Okay.
Let's start off with a good old Christian theme of grace.
Yeah, so for grace, I'm going to say Mercy by Bad Omens. So this is off their record. What is it called? Like Finding God Before God Finds Me, or something like that.
Yep. Great one.
Yeah, and it has a whole bunch of spiritual themes, and they're not necessarily like a Christian band per se, but Mercy, there's this ongoing, basically, I know we suck, have mercy on us kind of vibe. And I think mercy and grace kind of go hand in hand, right? Grace is this like unearned gift. Mercy to an extent is similar. And so I thought they played nicely together.
Good choice. Forgiveness.
So I did Leveler by August Burns Red, which, I mean, they repeatedly say, I forgive you, Queen of Hearts. And I kind of hear this song as almost like, I don't know if somebody got cheated on or has like a breakup kind of vibe. That's how I've heard it. But there's this part like right before a breakdown where Jake Lur says, but you're the deceiver with a lying tongue and matching lips. My heart thirsts for vengeance, but my Father has taught me forgiveness. If I didn't decide to follow him, I would devour you like a lion, leaving your bones out to dry.
Love that.
Later on in the song, he says, I forgive you, Queen of Hearts. I forgive you, Queen of Hearts. And so there is this like real human, messy, something bad happened. I want to get revenge, but God says I shouldn't do that. I forgive you.
Oh, that's great. We've talked a little bit about lament. So how about lament in metal?
Yeah, so I picked a fun one for lament. I did Reptar, King of the Ozone by The Devil Wears Prada, which is just kind of a lament of the destruction of the earth, hence the ozone nod. And so, yeah, that's why I picked that one. But I just love that song, and I really wanted to sneak that song title into this podcast.
Oh, the titles of some of these songs are absolutely incredible. I love them. Yeah. I'm really excited to get to see them playing on Halloween with Motionless.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be sweet.
Yeah, they're gonna be in Philly. It will be amazing. So Justice, what comes to mind for that?
Yeah, so I picked a rather provocative one for this one, which is, I think, again, this is, to lean into the whole prophetic tradition, speaking truth to power, so to speak. It's a song called Thoughts and Prayers by Motionless in White. It is not for the faint of heart. It is rather aggressive lyrically, but it's basically pointing out the ways in which religious institutions have harmed people. And they're kind of saying, like, your thoughts and prayers are not enough. And like, if you guys aren't going to take care of people, we will. But there is an honesty in it where Chris Motionless returns and he says, like, all of this bad stuff I just said about your religion, if you can prove to me otherwise that you are good and loving people and taking care of them, then forgive me. I will take back everything that I say. But until you prove me wrong, your thoughts and prayers are meaningless. So that's why I picked it for justice. It's a lament, and I think it's a prophetic critique that we should heed.
Relatable. How about resurrection?
So this one was harder for me. It's a little bit abstract, the direction I went, but I went with In Darkness by Lorna Shore, which the song talks a lot about death. It talks a lot about living in darkness. It's kind of, I don't want to say nihilistic. It's a little bit more, I guess, within the absurd tradition, because it then says, but like, nevertheless we live. Like, in darkness we are born again. And so it has kind of this, like, again, recognition of the human condition, and then this like nevertheless energy. So there's this like resurrection out of the darkness. So that's why I picked that one.
I like it. How about hope?
Yeah, here's your song by President.
Yes.
I picked In the Name of the Father because there's a really famous part in the song where, the music dies down right before the breakdown. And he says something along the lines of like, we
all choose to find hope because hope is choosing to find meaning in a meaningless world.
Boom. Yes. And so that's why I picked that one. The cheeky way I like to say this is that on days when I feel like I can honestly posit ontological truth claims of ultimacy, I'm a process theologian. And on days when I can't, I'm a radical theologian. And so this kind of like, which comes out of like this kind of existentialist death of God tradition. And so that kind of choosing to find hope, it's like a hope against hope. Nietzsche critiques hope and says hope is like the evil of all evils, because what he's saying is it keeps oppressed people oppressed. It justifies the systems of power. If we just sit around like, oh, I hope something changes. But that's not the kind of hope I'm talking about. I'm talking about hope as an act of defiance, as an act of courage. Like, hope is not passive, but deeply active. We hope by moving our feet and by doing things. And so I think that line from President leans into that. And that's why I picked that one.
Yeah, as soon as I saw it on the list, like, I know exactly what line made him choose that. That was beautiful. How about doubt?
Yeah, so this is probably the most, would be the most shocking and jarring song on this playlist. It's Unanswered by Suicide Silence, which I mentioned earlier. And I mean, it's brutal.
Don't start with that if you don't know metal.
Yeah, please don't. But it's a critique and indictment of God. Like, where are you? I mean, the line that's repeated over and over is, where's your fucking God? And it's just this like deep, angry, resentful song. And so like, I was like, yeah, this feels pretty doubtful to me. So if you need honesty with your doubt, this is the place to go. But yeah, know that it is rather intense.
It is. Incarnation.
Ooh, yeah. So this one was also kind of difficult, but I went back to Lorna Shore just because I love them so much. I probably could have done all Lorna Shore songs.
I was expecting at least a couple on that list. Not gonna lie. You did not disappoint.
So I picked Prison of Flesh because I think, to the point when we talked about incarnation earlier, that's really about identifying with the messiness of the human condition. And Prison of Flesh is a very honest song where Will Ramos, the lead vocalist, is wrestling with his family's history of dementia and Alzheimer's. And it's a genuine fear of his. And so that's why he's calling this a prison of flesh, because he's terrified to lose his mind and be stuck in his body. Oh, and so I
didn't know that backstory. I gotta go listen to it again now.
Yeah, that's why I picked that song, because it wrestles with the messiness of the human condition. And again, that's to me what the incarnation is. So
last one for this round, because we have to. Apocalypse.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did Pray for Plagues by Bring Me the Horizon, which I think just the name, there you go. it's, again, the song has some pretty aggressive lyrics, but there's these bits where it says, close your eyes, pray for plagues. Oh Lord, cleanse this earth and bring upon our doomsday. Oh, close your eyes, pray for plagues, cleanse this earth and bring our doomsday. And it's, yeah, again, it's a rather crazy song because it wrestles with the messiness of the human condition, because it's talking about a particular relationship that he's not so thrilled about, to say the least. And then he gets to this bit where he's like, Christ, I'm asking you for just one thing. I'm asking you for just one thing. Eradicate this disease. And it's brutal, but it very much fits this kind of apocalyptic, close your eyes, pray for plagues, cleanse this earth and bring our doomsday.
Now, are you cool if I add that playlist into our show notes for anyone to listen to?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. So we will have that in the show notes. I know we're getting close to time here. So before we finish up, I want to ask, is there anything related to these topics or beer camp that we did not address that you want to make sure we do?
No, I mean, I don't think so. I've really enjoyed this conversation a lot. You know, it's been fun to sit down and think specifically through metal music. And, you know, I think the real gift that it is for people who are willing to kind of move past the aesthetics and the messiness and hear what is being done. So I've enjoyed this, man. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, me too. Josh Patterson, thank you for taking the time to be on here with us today. It has been a pleasure. I have loved this. I want to give you the last minute here of the pod that you can rep anything that you are working on, your own podcast, shamelessly self-promote, let the listeners know where they can find you. And then if you are up for it, I would love for you to close our episode with a metal liturgy of your own making.
All right. So plug the pluggables. So yeah, again, Rethinking Faith podcast. You can find it pretty much anywhere you like to listen to podcasts. I have a Substack, also Rethinking Faith. It is completely free. I don't have any paid subscribers on there. But if you ever do feel the need to support my work, I do have a Patreon, which my Patreon, as you mentioned, the Emogelicals is on there, which is a Patreon exclusive show I do with my buddy Jed Payne from Church and Other Drugs. I also release all of my episodes ad-free on there. So if you're like me and don't like listening to ads in your podcast, that's a nice thing. And then also I put bonus content on there. Specifically, there are some things that are better left behind a paywall. And that is a series, an ongoing series that I do called Happy Hours, where the S at the end of hours in parentheses. And that is when me and my theologically inclined friends get filled with the holiest of spirits and chaos tends to ensue. So that's a good time. You know, if you want to hear crazy conversation with Tripp, go find that.
I can confirm that is worth the price of a subscription. It's quite entertaining to hear some of those conversations. So I definitely recommend it.
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram, my own personal page, and also Rethinking Faith. And yeah, those are kind of the pluggables, I guess. As far as a metal liturgy, I'm gonna do my best, and I'm gonna try to offer that in a form of a benediction that I'm gonna also try to make up here on the spot.
All right.
Dear listeners, may you go forth embracing everything about you that makes you you. May you go forth embracing the messiness of the human condition. And may you go forth knowing that the God of the universe chose not to be God without you, and instead fully embraced the messiness of the human condition. And so can you. Amen.
Amen and amen. You've been listening to the Bible Uncut and Unfiltered. We hope we provided a healing place to discuss the questions you can't ask and the context you won't learn in church. If you enjoyed the podcast, would you take a minute to share it with a friend? You could also rate and review on your podcast app. If you'd like to donate to keep our work going, you can go to our website, thebibleuncut.com, and click on the Support Us tab. While you're there, check out the recommended resources and blog where we post show notes and other articles. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.